Here we go. All right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Breakfast with Disaster. My name is Dan Bauer. I am back. I am hosting, at least for today. And if you guys never watched the show before, we are live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. We have a simple mission in mind. We want to tell you about all the worst things that can happen to you so you can avoid them. And we know that because we're Serve Pro and we clean them up. Today we are talking about a disaster that is not in our usual realm of water, fire, mold, etc. But the disaster that's going on, is that really strong to say, Michelle? In hiring,
It is a
people.
disaster. You
Yeah,
are
it is.
right. Yeah.
And Michelle's here with us. Michele Pratt was kind enough to join us to talk about this. She is a new business development rep over at Aebly and Associates. She's a sales and marketing rock star in her own right. Her focus over there is, and tell me if I screw this up, employee benefit programs, retention, things like that. You've done about 15 years in compliance. You're licensed in accident, health, and life in New York State. You've got Zeke and Ziggy, Brendan and Lydia. Two of those people are dogs.
Yep.
Anything else you want to say about yourself?
Um, sure. Yeah. Thanks, Dan. Thanks for the intro. It was a pretty good tight intro. One of the things that I do is when I work predominantly with HR managers, but I also work with business owners. And what I do is I kind of look at a holistic approach to the employee benefits. I don't just come in and say, okay, here's your rates for this carrier for your health benefits. But I talk to them about a kind of a more comprehensive approach, just because of employee turnover is really at an all-time high.
Right.
I did pull some data this morning, and I found a stat that said that the current employee turnover rate for 2022 is 57.3%. That's pretty astounding. So that means one of your two employees is going to leave. And apparently the stat is as far as the first year, which used to, there used to be that rule. Hey, if you get a job, you should stay there a minimum of a year, really two. And the stat for first year employees leaving is 33%. So
Yeah.
that's pretty high. That's pretty high as well.
Yeah.
And we know that the pandemic had a lot to do with it. The percentage rate of current employee turnover is really up 12 points over 2019, which is astounding. So, if there's some things that you can do to try to help combat that, I like to work with the business owners and HR managers to help them navigate it, because it's kind of a mess right now. It's a disaster, as you would say.
I'm getting told that our screen is black, which is
My
strange to
screen
me.
is black.
There we go. I got us
Oh,
up.
okay.
So you got the audio version. Now you can see what we look like in the flesh.
Okay. Let's see.
Apologize for the technical difficulties. Let's dig into this question. And the reason that we're talking about this here is because I know that a lot of the folks who watch this and listen to this are insurance agents, and
Hmm.
they many are hurting to hire. Entry level people, maybe people who already have some level of licensure. I know this because they try to hire me when I'm there, and I'm married into this job, unfortunately, so I can't take you guys up on this.
But Dan,
Um,
you'd be a great catch.
Thank you
So
so
I
much.
understand why they would want you.
No one's ever told me that before.
Oh,
But
okay.
thank you
Well,
for
today you
letting
heard
me
it. You
fish.
heard it first. Yeah.
Um, we talked about this a little bit before we went on, and one of the trends that you were talking about was, well, job hopping to an extent of, you were just talking about the stats, but the reason why people were doing it is they have this ideal job in mind, and maybe since the pandemic, and employees are a little bit freer to job around, and so people have an ideal job in mind and they're looking for it. What is that? I mean, what are people looking for when they're looking for an ideal job? What does that look like for them?
So predominantly, with what I'm finding is kind of number one is still the flexible work schedule.
Mm,
72% of the workforce is still working remotely, present company included. Although, my position was going to be remote regardless, of when I was hired for our company, just because a lot of the agents will work remotely.
mm,
And I was, it didn't matter to me, going to office or, work from home. It's kind of a similar concept. But with 72% of folks working remotely, part of the challenge with that is trying to really relay that corporate culture.
Right.
So when we talk about corporate culture, we look at things like, do you have a pizza party on Friday? Do you have dress down day? Do you have, all those things that people look forward to? Oh, hey, Tuesday's donut day. Can't wait to get to work on those types of things. So when you're working remotely, you lose that. You lose that touch, and you lose that connection and that corporate culture.
Right.
So I feel like there's kind of, you know, there's two sides of it. One side is the flexible work schedule and working remotely. And then the other side is that corporate culture.
Right.
And part of developing that corporate culture is determining how to engage employees. And the stats find that the more that employees are engaged, the more likely they are to stay in their position or stay at their company and maybe find another position that they might be better suited for. I can tell you that companies that offer better benefits have a 19% increase in their retention.
Okay.
And those benefits could include, what I do with this, which is the health benefits side of things. Or it could be their PTO, which is very important these days, and also their 401k. And then there's some other, ancillary benefits that they could have that an employer could offer. Those could be things like, a chiropractor who comes in, a couple times a year and does an assessment of your employees and maybe does adjustments right on site, or, more health and awareness types of things. In fact, what we're seeing from the carriers, which would be like a Blue Cross, Independent Health, Univera, there was a common theme this year in open enrollment, and that was really focusing on wellness over illness. So generally speaking, when you would sit through a carrier presentation and they would talk about the benefits for the year in open enrollment, there was always a big focus on prescription drugs.
Right.
And what was on formulary and what wasn't, and what the cost was, and all those types of things. Now they're trying to focus on things that are more preventative. I found a couple of the carriers are allowing for massage and acupuncture and those types of, supportive health, wellness
Right.
types of services, opposed to, the reactive type.
Sure. I found out yesterday that I could use my independent health bonus to get scuba diving certified, which was interesting.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
See,
so
they're
find me in the
thinking of,
ocean.
yeah, isn't that great? Like, you never would have expected that would be a benefit that you would
Not at all.
be able to take advantage of.
I want to back up to something you said already, because if I'm watching this and I'm thinking like, how do I build this workplace, right? How do you figure out what's going to work for your employees? Like you mentioned things like, I don't know, pizza parties and dress down day and
Um,
having a hybrid workforce, but I imagine it's not just like a blanket fix for everyone. I can't start having
no.
pizza parties and let people work from home 2 days a week and expect this problem to be solved forever, right?
Correct. Yeah, you're 100% correct, Dan. It's really knowing your employees, really caring, like really knowing your employees and really caring about them and treating them almost like they're your family, where different things about them. Maybe about, their children or grandchildren, or, what some of their hobbies are in the weekend, and things that are really of interest to them that are really going to engage, provide that employee engagement and have them as more of an engaged employee. Because I think many, in talking to people, if you have a positive corporate culture, that's gonna, that it's gonna be a chain reaction. Whereas, conversely, if you have a negative, if you have someone who's a negative Nancy, if they get to people who have been positive, you might have that that opposite
Right.
problem, you know, and it's a problem.
Let me ask
Um,
you this: if I wanted to go, like, say I work at an agency and I think these are great ideas, and there's maybe a bit of hesitance internally to invest in this stuff. Um,
mhm,
I'm an agency owner, and I don't want these employees to break my heart when I start buying them pizza or I get to know them. I invest a little bit more in them, and then they kind of follow this trend of job hopping or not taking me seriously or not getting
right.
invested. How do you have that conversation with somebody to show them the real kind of tangible value of this?
I know that there was years ago, and it's probably an increased number, but the cost of hiring and firing someone was generally around $100,000. And
Wow.
that doesn't mean that they're $100,000 employee. It means what you have committed to their training, what you're paying into their benefits, the onboarding, trajectory as far as how long it takes someone to ramp up to really get to that level of really understanding and knowing their job and being able to do it successfully. So it's, there's so many complicated components to figuring out what the right thing is. And each company and each situation is going to be different based on what their setup is and how,
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, before the pandemic, many companies kind of had this corporate culture. And I'll give you an example. Like people wanted to go work for Google because they had snacks all day, or they
Mm-hmm.
had, those types of corporate culture things. And I know that during the pandemic, they had all of their employees work remotely for a while. And then a couple months ago, they said, oh no, no more remote. You have to be in the office so many days a week to maintain your job. So
Right.
I think that they understood the value of bringing folks back, having that collaboration, because that's what you miss when you're independent and remote. You don't
Sure.
have that as much of that collaboration as you would have being in the office or working with folks, and instead of just doing your job and checking the box that you have done what you're supposed to do.
Sure. Let me ask. Let's put the before we wrap up here, kind of the shoe on the other foot for a
Yeah,
bit. Say we're talking about job seekers or people who are
sure.
currently employees, and are more in that role of things. You're talking about people who may, like, say, take those Google employees for example, who maybe had an ideal in mind. I was working from home; it was great. They have to go back to
Yeah.
the office. How do you? So I don't know if this is maybe part of your role. How do you coach someone in figuring out what their ideal job actually looks like or their position looks like and what their negotiables are?
Right.
'Cause
It's really making a list,
mhm,
you know. And I was a victim, I'd say a victim of the pandemic and losing a job that I had had for 5 years and was very entrenched in.
mhm,
And when I had to go look for work, I made a list
right,
of what I wanted and what I didn't want. And there were certain things that were non-negotiable. I knew I didn't want to travel, across the straight state into New York City like on a regular basis, like I had been. Um, I knew that I wanted to work for a certain type of company. I knew I wanted more collaboration. I wanted, maybe a little bit less responsibility as far as some of the duties that I had. So it
sure,
was really, you really have to kind of have a conversation with yourself about what's really the most important. And it
sure,
can't always be money. It can't always be, I want that high salary. You have to look at, you know, I mean, they say that there's really not a work-life balance, and I tend to, there's times that I agree, and then there's
mhm,
others, and then there's other days that I'm like, no, there is a little bit of work-life balance depending on how you communicate with who you work with and work for.
well, maybe let's dig into that maybe as our final point here. Again, in the job seeker mentality, we're potentially, I don't want to cause any bad
Yeah.
karma here or
No,
anything,
no.
but potentially at a point where there's a recession coming, where the pendulum's going to swing back the other way,
Right.
and the pressure is going to be again on employees to prove that they should keep their jobs, as rough as that says or sounds. And I understand things are never going to go back to how they were before the pandemic. So how can people stand out without just sort of working harder, sacrificing that work-life balance, burning themselves out? How do you still show, hey, I'm motivated to be here, I'm enthusiastic, but I still want to, I still need to advocate for myself,
Right.
if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up, Dan, because, you know, if you listen to the news and you listen to some of the investment experts, they're indicating that we're not just leading to a recession, we're in one now, and it's not going to get better. So the best thing that you can do is, if you've landed this job that is or is not your ideal job, you make your job as ideal as it can be
Right.
where you're at. And jobs are not going to be as plentiful as they were. And I think now employers are even scaling back on what their offerings were, as far as, maybe salaries and flexibility and those types of things, because they're finding that, they have to finesse that to see what's going to work for them and for the employees that they want to attract.
Sure. Well, it'll definitely be an interesting year
Next
plus
couple
ahead
of months,
us.
right? Yeah.
Any final points?
No, I think that, if you should really, if you're looking for a job right now, or if you're trying to hire employees, either way, looking at the whole package, like everything that is offered, and determining if that's best for your company as far as how you're trying to attract and retain employees. And as an employee yourself, when you're looking at the benefits and really mapping out what's going to work for you, and how it's going to affect you financially, and really understanding what your numbers are, as well as some of those non-dollar negotiables like paid time off, flexibility, those types of things.
Perfect. Well, thank you again, Michelle, for joining us.
For having
If
me,
people
Dan,
have
I appreciate it.
if people have additional questions about this stuff, how can they find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, or they can go to the Aebly website. My email address is on there. I'm Pratt at aebleyandassociates.com. It's kind of a long one, but either way, they can find me and ask me whatever questions they have, and happy to answer.
Perfect. Well, now I'm gonna kick off everybody's favorite part of this, which is the prize wheel. And
Ooh.
I am. You can't see it on your end, Michelle, but it is covering my
No.
face.
Because I'm not eligible, I would take it.
Are you a part of the Mug Club?
I don't know.
Oh my God! Well, we got to amend that. We'll talk about that.
We
after.
got to change that.
Yeah. So I am spinning the wheel right now. It does appear to be somewhat glitching out. We're just going to kind of go with it.
It's a glitchy kind of day.
Yeah. $6.93, and if you guys are unfamiliar with the Serve Pro Mug Club, you get a cool coffee mug. It's got a number on the bottom. We register to this prize wheel. We draw a number every week, and you get a prize. And if you're watching, you get a double prize. So shout out to Christine Hankey from Great Lakes Insurance. You are this week's winner. If you're watching, make sure you leave a comment so we know that you're there, and you get your double prize.
She's our neighbor. She's
really?
She's an Aebly neighbor on Seneca Street.
Maybe
so,
I'll come deliver your mug and her prize at the same time. Right. Save myself some gas. Next, we can talk about gas prices next.
That'll be next week's
That's what everybody wants to chat about.
Disaster.
Yeah.
Talk about disaster, right, Dan?
Well, geez, we could riff on that for another 15 minutes, but we'll spare everybody. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Good to see you, Kathy, Jennifer, Jackie, Betty, Haley, Melissa, Lisa, Nikki, Melissa, Devin. Good to see you guys all. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Dan.
See ya.
Take care.